Boards and booze, booze and boards, drinks and beers, fight some hordes. Drank too much, forgot our swords, ran back home, filled our gourds, got drunk again, sang some chords. Boards and booze and boards, with Mickey and Jeb.
Are you gonna do something stupid, Jeb?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Okay.
If you couldn't tell what we were being, it's the game Centipede.
Did you like Jeb's sound effects? Did he look like a centipede?
Did that bring you back to the 80s? If
No,
it did.
but this box should. Isn't that cool? I mean, look at, like, even from the, like, the stripes.
Yeah.
Like, the horrible stripes that they used to put on clothing. Am I wrong?
No, I
did not.
The art reminds me of the original Mega Man game that came out in the States, where it had like this big mural, and it looked exactly
just like that.
It had that kind of feel, yeah. So, but yes, we are going to play Centipede today.
Centipede, the board game,
Yes,
not the video
not the
game.
arcade game.
But it sure does look like it's the arcade game, and from the looks of the box.
Yep.
So
IDW Games
Yep.
is the publisher.
2 to 4 players,
30 to 45 minutes.
and age 12 plus.
We saw this at PAX Unplugged.
Yep.
And that's where I picked it up.
Do we have a
Centipede,
game
right?
designer? John Gilmore, Nicole Klein, and Anthony Amato.
Yep. So what they're trying to do is bring a video game to a board game.
Yep.
So we're gonna go through components, how to play. We'll
Yep.
play a game of it, and we'll let you know what we think of it.
Yep. And if Centipede wasn't your cup of tea,
Oh, what's coming out?
yeah, they're getting ready to do some more of these. So
Yeah.
if retro video games, if it brings you back, and you like this episode, they've got more coming, and we'll let you know what those are later on.
Yep. Okay, we are going to go through the components of Centipede real quick. There's not too much to talk about. So the first thing, as you can see, we already have it set up, is the game board. It's a game board. And there's certain areas to it where, like, these colors are where the gnome can be, and then
So
these are where the...
this is basically like in the video game. This was where how far your trackball would reach. Obviously, the board's small, so it's just back and forth in this. So you're not going to be able to kind of swerve like you used to be able to. Works fine though.
Yep. All right. So the next thing we are going to talk about are the components that deal with the gnome, because since it's an asymmetrical game, there's the Centipede side and the gnome side. So the things that the gnome gets to use are the dice pool card.
And that is that card.
And that comes with gnome dice.
There's your gnome dice.
6 of them, right?
Right.
Next up are the gnome control cards.
Alright, and so basically this looks like your controller. I'm going to set it on the board for a minute, but so it gets set up like this. Right?
Yep, there's 4 of them.
Okay, so this is going to go at the bottom of the board down there, but that's part of his components.
And then there is the gnome himself.
And then the gnome himself, where he goes in his play area.
Yep.
And Jeb actually got an alternate one with his game, which you can have a garden gnome instead of this guy.
Yep.
But
And
you can use either one, it doesn't matter.
there's also the alternate color.
Right.
You can pick to be a green gnome if you wanted. When it's one-on-one, it doesn't matter too much, but
Right.
when you do 2 versus 2, then
Yeah, you're going to want the colors,
matter.
yeah.
For the Centipede components,
Yep, that is it for gnome.
yep, the Centipede has Centipede cards, which there are green ones and there are blue ones.
That's what those look like.
So
And
whichever
then
color Centipede you
use,
decide.
and they're all very, very clear. They're not, you won't have any problems mixing them up. They'll be clear to see that you got the wrong one.
Yep. There is the creature speed card, and that lists the speeds at what all the creatures go at. So like the different segments or the different sizes of centipede.
However big your centipede is, plus the flea and the spider, and I think that's it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Alright, and then the Centipede player also has the mushrooms.
Which is very cool. Nice, yeah, by the way, these are nice wooden components. But there's your mushrooms. All the components look like they're old school 8-bit stuff.
Alright, and then there is the Centipede segment, so you actually have to have a centipede, right?
So, and he goes together like this. Now, one of the very cool things that they did was that they gave you stickers for every single piece. That way you don't have to hunt for a particular head of the centipede, especially when he gets blown up. You know, if I blow up this, boom, I've got another piece of a centipede. So that was a nice touch on the components to keep it simple.
And there's also a blue centipede.
And here's the blue centipede. And that's for either having a different color centipede or playing
2 versus 2.
2 versus 2.
Yep. And then the last thing that the centipede player has are the bugs. So there is the flea and the spider.
And there are some fleas. And here are some spiders. And that's what those look like.
And that's everything for the components for Centipede.
That wraps up your Centipede components, and hopefully, as you can see, they really did try to capture the feel of what the game used to look like on the screen. I think they did a pretty good job, actually.
Yep. So we will get into how to set up a game of Centipede. Alright, so we're going to go through the setup for Centipede really quick. The first thing you're going to do is place the game board, like we already have, and set the dice pool card next to it. And you probably want to set this closer towards the Gnome player.
They're the ones that are going to be using the dice, so yes, that's what you want to do.
Yep. The next thing to do is the players will alternate between placing 3 mushrooms in a column, and it must be an empty space between the dotted lines. So if you can't tell, there's dotted lines on the board, so it's talking about all these columns, and we're going to alternate placing 3 to a column. There cannot be more than 3 in a column, and you cannot place them on a centipede spawn point. There will be 3 mushrooms left over. That is not right, Mickey. This is columns.
3 in a column?
Yes.
How about that, Jim?
Yep, that's correct. So I'll do one. You can do your next one. I don't think they really care too much. Alright, so
that's what it's going to look similar to what it could look like, because it's random every time.
Alright, so the next step is to choose the roles of who's going to be the gnome and who's going to be the centipede. So you can, I don't know,
Well, you can just
use
do it
whatever
however
way
you
to
want.
choose it.
If you really can't decide, then roll off for who's going to play what. It's not that big of a deal.
Yep. After that, the gnome player is going to sit on either side of the board. We're just gonna pick the sides and set it up like that. So we'll have this gnome guy here, or the gnome will be down here. Then you are going to place the gnome on any square in the gnome area. So I'll be the gnome in this instance, and I'll place him there. Then take the 4 game control cards and place them near the board for the gnome player. So I will place these here. Next up, roll all 6 dice and place them on the dice pool card.
You can arrange them however you want. He's just putting them on there.
The centipede player is going to sit opposite of the gnome player, which kind of makes sense. They are going to use the spawn points that are closest to them, so that's these 2 black holes there. Then the centipede player is going to choose a color and take all the cards and pieces associated with it.
So we have green here, and then all the green cards.
Alright.
They're green on the back also.
Yep. You will shuffle the deck of cards and draw 3.
I have drawn 3 cards.
Then you will make a 6-segment centipede and then move it onto the board coming out of one of the spawn points. So
Okay,
you're just simulating the centipede coming out, so you could just...
So there's one, so that's a segment, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'll put his body on. That, to me, that's the easiest way to do it, unless Jeb told me I just did that wrong.
No, that's how I would do it.
So if I would have started from this end, he would have been going this way.
Yep.
That's basically the only difference.
Alright, then you will set the bug pieces and creature speed card nearby. So the creature speed card is already here.
Right here?
And the other bug pieces that are used are the flea and the spider, so just keep them off to the side. And they'll be used whenever they come into play. And everything else is returned, which is like the alternate colors of the Centipede and Gnomes. Right. So you are ready to play the game. We are going to talk about gameplay. A quick overview of the game is that it is alternating turns between the Gnome and the Centipede, and the Gnome is the one who starts the game. The win condition is that the Gnome wins when the last Centipede segment is off the board. The Centipede wins if it gets to the Gnome zone, which is that area, or there is a bug that eats it, and that means the bug is going to be in the space above the Gnome on the Centipede's turn. The Gnome and the Centipede turns are a bit different. On the Gnome...
Is that why it's called an asymmetrical game, Jeb?
Yes, that's why it's called
Thanks.
asymmetrical.
Just wanted to clarify.
Alright. So... I couldn't talk, and then I started to talk, and Mickey got me, and now I can't talk again. Alright. So on the Gnome turn, the first thing that you're going to do is that if there is only one die in the die pool, you're going to re-roll all the die and place them onto the dice pool card. But in this instance, there's 6 in there, so I don't do that.
Right, but just to elaborate, so as the game goes on, you use the dice. If it looked like that at the beginning of Jeb's turn, he doesn't get an option to use that. It's re-roll at that point.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, after that step, the Gnome player is going to activate one die. So what they do is choose one of them, and then you have to do the actions on it in the order listed, and then you remove the die from the pool. And the way that you do it is you look at the number, and you go from bottom left to the top right is how you activate them, or the order of activation.
Right.
So I'm going to pick the 4 with the 2 shots after it.
Okay, so just real quick on the die, you have a couple of different symbols. If you can see this, you have these stars, which are what, Jeb?
They are shots.
Okay, so there's shots, and then you have numbers, which are...
The movement, the number of movements.
And then there's one other, 2 other symbols, right? No.
There's a card symbol.
Yeah, there you go. And then there's a rectangle that is a card symbol.
And that means if one of these cards are used, they would be upside down. When you get that card, it flips it back up. So that's what the different symbols are.
Okay.
So you pick the die, you do what it says, and then you remove it from the dice pool. And then that would be it for the Gnome's turn. So other things that happen on the Gnome's turn, at any point you can use one of these cards, and when you use it, you flip it face down. And that means you can't use it again until it flips face up again.
So tell us what they are.
Alright, so this one, when you use it, you re-roll all the dice and put them onto the dice pool. This one gives you a free shot wherever your Gnome is. This one lets you move one space. And then this one removes one mushroom from the board.
Like automatically. You don't have to do like anywhere. So you can basically bypass, having to clear something in front of you. You can just take it off earlier.
Let's talk about the different things that the Gnome does. So moving, when you move the Gnome, you have to move him in one direction and the full distance of his movement unless he's stopped by the wall. If he's by the wall when he starts his movement, he has to move in the opposite direction.
So if he's all the way over here and there's a movement on the die, you don't have any choice but to move him back to the other direction. If he's right in the middle of the board, you can decide which way he wants to go, and if he bumps into the wall, like say he's here and you have a movement of 4, you can still move this way, but you're only moving 1.
Right.
So...
And also if you're there and you get the 4...
You have to go back this way.
You have to go for...
The other
You can't go 2 that way. Or
right.
That
it's
way.
not an up to, it's a full amount.
Yep. Alright, next is shooting. So when the Gnome shoots, You imagine it shooting vertical. So whatever the next thing in the vertical line that would be hit gets hit. So
Right. So if the gnome was right there, and the first thing on the die, like say he was using that die, first thing is a shot, he would shoot that mushroom. It would come off the board.
then he moves
Then
one.
he would move one in whatever direction that player shot, and then the last action on that die is to shoot again, and then so that would get removed.
Yep. As Mickey said, when you shoot a mushroom, you remove it from the board. If you shoot a flea or a spider, you remove it and replace it with a mushroom. If you shoot the centipede, you remove the segment that got shot and replace it with a mushroom. And then you will make, depending on where the centipede got shot, you'll turn, it gets split into 2 centipedes, and you'll flip one of the segments to the head.
Right. So, for an example, let's just say that some of this was cleared. Let's just assume that this segment got shot. That would get removed. I'm gonna borrow this for a second. It would turn into a mushroom, and then this would flip over into the head of a centipede, and that's what you would have if that got shot.
Yep.
Okay. Not that difficult. Just kind of like the game, honestly.
And then the last thing on the gnome's turn, recharging these cards. As I said earlier, when you use them, they get flipped face down. To recharge them, the only way you can do it is by activating the die that says to flip one over. And then the other way to flip one of the cards face up is that at the end of your turn, if you didn't use any of the cards, then you get to flip one face up. So those are the 2 ways to get these cards flipped face up.
Right. So notice that there's no way to refresh them all at once. It's
Right.
always one at a time, either via a die or from not using one of your powers on your turn. Now, eventually, if you use them all, you would have a turn where you couldn't use anything and you'd automatically get one. But
Yep.
just keep in mind, strategically, there's never anything on your turn that's going to refresh your entire board.
Right. Okay, so that's about it for the gnome turn. We're going to talk about the centipede turn now. So the first thing that the centipede player will do is play one of their cards and follow the instructions on it, and then discard that card.
So you have various cards in the game that you'll get to play that do different things. And is that not an optional step, Jeb?
You have to play
You
one.
have to play a card.
Yep.
I'm not going to read everything I have in my hand, but I'll just give you a for instance. So I have a card called Mushroom. It says place a mushroom in any empty space on the board that is not adjacent to a centipede piece, or remove any mushroom on the board. So I could play that card, and I could either put a mushroom somewhere, but I couldn't put it like right here to make him bounce down one, because that would be adjacent to him. And I guess I couldn't put him in
Right.
any of these spaces because those would also be adjacent. However, I could pick any other space, place a mushroom, or maybe I knew that the gnome had, set up something, or a flea set up something, or whatever, and I wanted to get rid of something so that I could make a line down. I could just take one off. Cards are pretty self-explanatory. We've already played once. We didn't see anything that made us really scratch our head on what they were trying to say.
Right. There are the other centipede cards, like, just to get an idea, there's one that spawns the flea, there's one that spawns the spider, create another centipede, like a berserk mode, stuff like that. So after you play your card, you're going to move all the bugs. So you must move all of them that are on the board, and you can do it in any order you want, but you have to make sure you move all of them. And you have to complete the movement of one bug before the next. And if you're asking how many spaces do the bugs move, that's where you would use the bug movement card.
So the reference card for your bugs is very handy. As Jeb's getting the other bugs out for you to see, I'm going to tell you how the centipede moves. So he's a full 6 right now. So at a length of 6, he moves 1. At a length of 5, he moves 2. At a length of 4, he moves 2. At a length of 3, he moves 3, 2, he moves 3, and then when he's just the head, he moves 4. So the way he moves is he goes back and forth. So, for example, he's 6 right now. I would move 1, and then just move his tail up to him. And that would be his movement for that turn. Now, I assume that Jeb's going to talk about what happens when he hits stuff in just a minute, but the flea, if he's on the board, the flea moves equal to a speed of 2. So if he moves down, 1, 2, if he hits something, he'll take it out of its way. But the other key to the flea is every spot that he touches, he is able to, if he wants to, leave a mushroom. That's correct, Jeb?
Yep.
So the flea, in my instance, just went through this spot. I could put a mushroom behind him if I wanted to.
And when Mickey said he removes whatever's in the space that he moves into, that can be other bugs, that can be part of the centipede, that can be mushrooms.
Whatever he bumps into. So the spider operates a little bit differently. I believe the flea comes in at the top of the screen. I don't remember what his placement ability is. Jeb's going to look that up. I know the spider has to come in from a side space.
I think it says on the flea card where the flea comes in. On the card that spawns him, I believe. Okay, so the spider has to come in. The spider comes in actually at the end of your moving, but it says spawn a spider on any empty space on the left or right edge of the board. One of the reasons that he doesn't come in before the movement phase is it would be a disadvantage to the gnome. He really needs a turn to be able to set up, because it would be totally unfair if you could place this thing and then take a movement with it. Yeah.
But what they mean by it is it has to come in on one of these empty side spaces. Can't come in the middle. It has to come in on one of the side spaces. Okay. He does have a movement of 9. His movement is a little interesting because he is able to go diagonal or orthogonally.
Or vertical. He
He
cannot go horizontal, that's the key.
Yeah, he can't go like that. Okay? So he can go diagonal or vertical, sorry. Orthogonal means either way, so scratch that. But anyways, he moves not up to 9 spaces, and that's assuming he has to stop when he hits something, right?
Right. He cannot move into or through bugs.
Okay, so I could go like 1 and just get rid of that mushroom.
Yeah, if he moves onto a mushroom spot, he gets rid of the mushroom and then he stops.
Right. So. Or I could go 1, 2 and get rid of that mushroom, or etc. But again, he has up to 9. Yeah,
the key is that you don't move, like...
You can't change directions.
Yeah, you pick a direction, you move him as far as you can.
Right. So if you remember, if you're old school and you remember the game, this guy would go... Do you like my sound effect? Is that good, Jeb?
Yep.
And then he would just wreak havoc with you, or blah blah blah. So it's a board game, so they had to make some decisions. So he gets the movement of the spider like in the game, because he kind of has to move across like this, back and forth like that, or whatever. But he can't just zip across this way. So and he stops if he hits something. So hopefully that makes sense on how the spider moves.
Yep. You want to talk about the centipede if he runs into a mushroom?
Yes, I can talk about that now. So let's assume that it's the centipede's turn and that mushroom is right in front of him. So he's still a 6. So he would basically, he runs into this mushroom, and that means he goes down. What he'll do is he'll run into it and he'll go down 1 space, and again he only moves 1, and then he turns back the other way.
Yep.
And then all his pieces move up. But Mickey, what happens if that space has a mushroom? If that space that he had gone into has a mushroom, the mushroom gets destroyed, and he still continues to go back in the other direction until he hits something again. Okay? That forces him to move down. what that means is kind of like in the game, if you really want some strategy here, if I can show an example, if I do this, and I'm not going to move his whole tail, but if he runs into this, he goes down, changes directions, he runs into this, he goes down, changes directions, he runs into this, and he goes down. So they actually made it just like the game. If you can construct a column, he will beeline it down, and his tail would be following him.
Yep.
I don't remember how it would have ended up, but something to that effect. So it's really kind of cool on how they made. But you just need to be really careful when you're doing that, because if you don't, Jeb and I would suggest that when you do, when he moves down, immediately turn the head into the direction that he's supposed to be facing. Because if he moves down and you leave it like that, and then it comes back to the centipede turn, there's a good chance that you are going to forget, like, which way he's supposed to be going. And you'll be like, well, but Mickey, his tail's going that way. Yeah, but you might not remember if he destroyed a mushroom or whatever to go down, and maybe he was supposed to be going this way, maybe he's supposed to be going this way. Just a good practice to get into, to always keep the head point going in the direction that the centipede is supposed to be going in.
Yep. And so, just to reiterate, when you move the bugs, you move them all. You move them one at a time. And the spider, the turn that it spawns, it doesn't get a movement.
Right.
And then after you move all your bugs, you're going to draw one card, and that's the end of the turn for the centipede player. If the deck is empty, then it gets reshuffled. The discard gets reshuffled, and you rebuild your deck again.
I think at that point, play continues until the game ends,
yeah,
right?
It just goes back and forth between players. Like I said, if any of the centipede segments get into this zone, the centipede player wins. If a bug ends up above the gnome and it's the centipede's player's turn, then the gnome player loses.
Right. One of the questions that Jeb and I had when Jeb picked up this game was, if you remember in the video game, the flea shoots down and he goes off the board, leaving mushrooms as he goes. So one of our questions was, what happens when the flea gets to the bottom of the board game? The person that we talked to said that it just sits there. Once he gets to the end, he sits there until the gnome shoots him, or the gnome is stupid enough to stand in front of him and dies.
Right.
I'll tell you right now, I don't like that. I probably house rule it, but that's the way they told us to play, so that's the way we're going to play. Because I feel like they did such a spectacular job getting the feel of the video game. I just feel like the flea should drop all his mushrooms and then leave. However, I can see the other side of the board game aspect is that, well, you're not going to have a ton of cards to be able to drop fleas all the time like they did in the game. So maybe having it sitting there adjusts for that factor. But I really kind of like that they hit everything else so spot on. I kind of would have liked him, maybe even just he goes down and comes immediately back up wherever the player likes. I don't know. It was just one of the things that I wish they would have done differently.
Okay, and then the last thing that I have notes on is there is a 4-player variant of the game, and the way that works is that 2 players are on teams, and you're going to have one centipede going this way, the other going that way, and then the gnomes are going to be shooting, and I don't know how that's going to play.
All kinds of havocs.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. We have not played that, but it sounds like it would be interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be nuts.
So I think that's about everything for gameplay.
Yeah,
so,
if we miss something, you'll see it. It's kind of like, it's really not that hard to play, and it's kind of interesting how they were able to translate this onto actually a pretty small board, to tell you the truth. So I guess we'll be back in a minute, and we'll give it a whirl for them to see, right?
Yep.